Civil War II is the worst thing since that other thing Brian Michael Bendis wrote. The structure of the story is a complete disaster, none of the characters feel authentic, and worst of all, the issue that divides the superhero community does not hold water. At least you can say the first Civil War felt weighty. Even though everyone acts like a toddler that needs a nap, you can see pros and cons to both sides. I can't say that here. The trade paperback starts with issue 0, then the free comic book day issue, then the 8-issue limited series. Looking at the cover, you can tell this will be framed over an argument between Iron Man and Captain Marvel, but Iron Man isn't even in the first 2 issues. By the time you finish issue 0, you'd likely think this is going to be a She-Hulk Captain Marvel argument. She-Hulk spends a lot of time in issue 0 in the courtroom arguing for her client. You cannot convict someone for something they might do. Meanwhile, we're introduced to this guy who gets the inhuman power to see the future. We also spend quite a bit of time with Captain Marvel talking about how superheroes are always on the defensive, with many near misses under their belts, and she would like to prevent the bad stuff from happening before it happens. See where this is going? Well, no, you don't, because She-Hulk barely plays any role in this story. But if you've read stories before, you would think this is the writer setting up the conflict of this story, with our 2 schools of thought being represented by 2 people who feel the way they feel for very good reasons. The cynic in me had 2 things to say. Get me out of here! Imprisoning me in another human is not natural! He also said the only reason this story exists is because Marvel Studios was putting out a movie called Captain America Civil War the same year. Since that movie has Iron Man and Captain America butting heads, let's capitalize on that. But they already butted heads in the previous Civil War. We don't want to retread that too much. Let's have Iron Man and somebody else he can argue it. But, and I say this as someone who doesn't know a lot about Iron Man, using knowledge of the future to serve and protect, and more selfishly, to guide and control, seems very Iron Man. In the first Civil War, if they had access to Ulysses, I could totally see Tony using him to hunt down the anti-registration heroes. If you have to have Iron Man in this debate, it would have made more sense for him to still be Superior Iron Man after the events of 2014's Axis storyline. In that, many heroes were inverted to act more villainous, and many villains were inverted to act more heroic. By the end, everyone was back to normal except Sabretooth and Iron Man. Then we got a series where Tony poisoned San Francisco and forced them to pay for the cure. That Iron Man would totally go for what Carol is doing, and find a way to make money off of it. Surely the year before Civil War II, when Tony was acting superior, there was already discussion about Civil War II. Maybe they wanted this to be like the first Civil War, where you can see where both sides are coming from. But ho ho ho, that ship has sailed, my friend. Let this be a She-Hulk Captain Marvel argument. She-Hulk isn't as A-list as Tony, it wouldn't work. Not long ago, Carol Danvers wasn't that A-list, but she got to be by being prominently featured in the Avengers for years, then getting her own solo comics, then a movie. Do the same with She-Hulk. Increase her stature by pitting her as the ideological opposite of Carol's preemptive profiling. Since, spoilers, Hulk dies in this story, I guess someone wanted to change She-Hulk's hulkiness and make her more like He-Hulk. She gets angry and slightly more monosyllabic, has trouble with control. I don't know if this was a Bendis idea that was passed to Mariko Tamaki, or if Tamaki pitched this and Bendis incorporated it into Civil War II. Either way, I don't like it. The thing I like about She-Hulk is she isn't a carbon copy of He-Hulk. We didn't need someone doing more Hulk stuff. It felt like they killed off Hulk so that she could be more like Hulk. Most stories have an inciting incident. You have your status quo, everything is normal, then the inciting incident breaks the status quo, forcing your characters to take action. In the first Civil War, it was the explosion that killed over 600 people in Stamford, Connecticut, which happens in the first issue, wasting no time getting the plot rolling. This story has 4 inciting incidents. Ulysses gets the power to predict the future in issue 0, without which none of this would have happened. There's the death of James Rhodes in the free comic book day issue, and again in issue 1. This prompts a lot of yelling. Tony kidnaps Ulysses and does some light torture, which angers the Inhumans and the other superheroes, but that doesn't kick off the actual conflict. Ulysses gets a vision of the Hulk killing everyone, and Clint Barton kills Bruce Banner in issue 3, so most of that issue is Hawkeye's Trial, and the entire event takes a break from the preemptive profiling debate so Matt Murdock can be the worst lawyer in the universe. When Hawkeye says Bruce asked for assisted suicide if he ever hulked out again, Matt says it's Clint's word against the world, even though they have video proof of Bruce admitting what Clint just said. Near the end of issue 3, Bendis remembers, oh, this was supposed to be about this debate. Then Tony yells about Carol using Ulysses at Clint's trial, which I'm not happy about any of this, Tony, but this is not the time or place. In issue 4, Carol arrests a woman who, as far as we know, is completely innocent, but because she might do something in the future, Carol imprisons her, which is what finally kicks off the brawl most people came to see. Let's be generous and not count the Free Comic Book Day issue, since it's not a full-length comic. The conflict does not start until the end of the 5th issue out of 9. Everything leading up to that is characters repeating the same discussion. Tony says this is wrong, Carol says I disagree, rinse and repeat. Bendis did this in his X-Men runs. One group of X-Men yelling at another group because Charles Xavier is dead. Well, I didn't mean to for 60 plus issues, until it all ends abruptly. This doesn't feel as egregious as the X-Men books, but it's still the same problem. In theory, characters using their words is good, but when it's over halfway into this story when the actual story starts, that's not good. And not to be mean, but I don't think Bendis is capable of handling a complex topic like this with care. He showed that in his X-Men run. He co-wrote Avengers vs. X-Men, which also suffered from this. Every writer has different strengths and weaknesses, and I don't think Bendis' strengths lie in characters having serious discussions. As soon as Rhodey died, and Carol said it was worth it, Tony could have grabbed a bunch of heroes to punch her then and there. Or you could cut Rhodey's death, since he doesn't feel like an actual character, but a plot contrivance. And not a very good plot contrivance, since his death doesn't contrive very much plot. You could start the story with some black and white thing Carol stops with the help of Ulysses. Tony says, it worked out this time, Thanos is unequivocally a bad guy, but it may not be so simple next time. Then Ulysses gets a vision of Miles Morales killing Captain America, and that could be your inciting incident. The cynic inside me, after begging me to let him out, said the only reason Rhodey is killed is because it would be too difficult to figure out what to do with him. He's best friends with Tony, but he's Carol's friends with benefits, so if they come to blows, he would have to choose a side. So we'll just kill him. Tony seems to be fighting Carol because of Rhodey's death, and not because he believes it's the right thing to do. He says they shouldn't use intel from Ulysses before Rhodey dies, but he's like, if you do, I won't fight you on it, but you probably shouldn't do it. Losing a friend can be rough, but Tony kidnapping someone and, in the victim's own words, torturing him is not a great look for Tony. Nobody comes off looking great in this story. She-Hulk spends an issue and a half preaching against prosecuting someone for a crime they didn't commit, is nearly killed by Thanos, then tells Carol to fight for the future. It's not Tony's, it's yours. What? Why did you flip-flop on this? I honestly think She-Hulk suffered some brain damage in this fight for her to completely back away from her stance she had in issue 0. When Tony studies Ulysses' brain, he finds out Ulysses isn't predicting the future, but making really good guesses, and his visions are not ironclad. Carol says she doesn't believe him, but if Beast studied his work, she would believe him. Beast says Tony's right. Carol says she's going to keep doing this. Then she arrests the woman who she thinks might be a Hydra agent. That plot thread is never picked up again, so we don't know if she was right or wrong. While this was going on, in Nick Spencer's Steve Rogers series, Steve was secretly working for Hydra, and Ulysses predicted some Hydra plan, but Steve tells another operative Hydra does not have any plans like that in the works. He would have no reason to lie, so we know Ulysses' visions won't always come true. This is where Carol comes off looking bad, because she does not care. You might say in Civil War 2, it's meant to be vague if these visions are going to happen. It's only in a Nick Spencer comic where we have proof the visions aren't 100%. Except in the Civil War 2 comic, Black Panther switches his loyalties from Carol to Tony and says some of the visions have not panned out, which makes Carol out into a monstrously bad person. At least in the previous Civil War, it wasn't so black and white. I have a hard time buying that anybody was on Team Carol during this ordeal. Tony asks Carol, what happens if Ulysses has a vision where you do something bad? And she says, it depends. I'm sorry, what? It depends when it's you, but when it's anyone else, they go to prison? There's a difference when Thanos is looking for the cosmic cube and trillions upon trillions could die, and a woman with a family worrying sick about her is arrested because better safe than sorry. Tony thinks the Thanos thing, Carol was already out of line, which makes it sound like Tony is suggesting they should have waited for Thanos to kill however many people and then stop him. He's not much better than she is in this debate, if we can even call it that. Anything that happens in a comic is going to be undone. Bucky dies, he's back. Charles Xavier Xavier dies, he's back. Captain America is a Hydra agent, then he's not. Thor was a woman, now there's a dude holding the hammer. The first Civil War, even though I have problems with it, I liked that it didn't get swept under the rug a few months later. The heroes who fought against registration were on the run for a couple of years after that. Captain America's death lasted 2 years, and following his return, he's not Captain America anymore. May Parker is nearly assassinated thanks to Spider-Man revealing his secret identity to the world, prompting Peter to make a deal with the devil, which can be traced back to Civil War. With this story, I don't know if there were any consequences. There's She-Hulk's transformation, which felt unconnected to this event. Hulk died and came back to life less than 2 years later. He was a different kind of Hulk, but that had nothing to do with Civil War II. Hulk goes through a change in status quo every time a new creator comes in, so you can't call Immortal Hulk a ramification of this event. Tony's not dead, hanging by a thread. I haven't read the Iron Man stuff following this, so I don't know what the reveal that Tony experimented on himself means for the future. This paved the way for Ironheart, but she was already on the scene in the midst of this story, so she would have been heroing around anyway, even if Tony wasn't in a coma. I don't know if the people on Tony's side are in hot water for what Mariah Hill calls an act of terrorism, but by the time you get to Immortal Hulk, Tony and Carol are working together like nothing happened. The Guardians of the Galaxy are apparently stranded on Earth until Carol gets them a replacement spaceship, and I think Kitty Pryde is reconsidering her place on the team in this silent panel focusing on her, while Star-Lord tells Carol she did the right thing. I don't know because Kitty had, I think, one line of dialogue in this event, and I have no idea what was going on with the Guardians after this story. Hawkeye is a murderer now, but has something planned, but I have no idea what. Carol tells the president she has some ideas about the future, but I don't know what that is either. What hurts this story is Ulysses transcends into godhood and is no longer available for Carol to use, so that puts to rest the argument over whether the heroes should use him. With the first Civil War, the source of the argument didn't go away at the end, so the aftermath felt bigger. Before Ulysses transcends to godhood, he shows everyone a series of visions of possible futures. Some of these visions seem to be hints of the big events in Marvel's near future, like Monsters Unleashed. Maybe Carol's ominous promise to the president could be her trying to use what they think is going to happen to their advantage. We get a page of Killraven fighting some Martians. I love Killraven, but I don't know why you would show this unless you intend to do something with it. In a 2006 miniseries called Wisdom, we see a young Killraven training with Shang-Chi for his destiny of killing Martians. What if Carol recruits Killraven to help her fight other aliens, like the Chitauri, who were a big deal in the lead up to and during Secret Empire? What if Carol accidentally causes one of the visions we saw in an effort to prevent it? Classic time paradox thing I'm shocked nobody mentioned once. What if, while the Guardians are stuck on Earth, more than just Kitty Pryde decide to stick around? Gamora or Rocket could realize they like it here and don't go back to space. What if Miles tries to retire from superheroing because he's scared of the future where he might kill Captain America? What if Tony actually died? You've got a replacement Iron Man, kill Tony and have Ironheart clean up his mess and forge her own destiny, like what happened when Steve Rogers died after the first Civil War. I like hero versus hero stories about as much as I like getting tortured by Lashif, so I don't think I ever would have liked the premise of this story. But even with a premise I don't like, this could have been better. Condense the first 4 or 5 issues so the actual conflict can take up more screen time than the lead up to the conflict. Swap out the characters heading up the battling sides, using Dark Tony from Axis against She-Hulk, or She-Hulk versus Captain Marvel. And if you're gonna do a big event like this, make it feel like it matters. Those are some of my suggestions. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, I'll be back next week to talk about something else. Until then, have a good one.